Hello and welcome to Quick Take TA here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is March 24th, 2024, and we're going to start by looking at Bitcoin. We will follow up with ETH, Solana, and Caspa real quick as well near the end, but I do want to get through the bulk of what I'm seeing on Bitcoin here. Now, since we last had a recorded video, Bitcoin, I believe that was on Tuesday. Yeah, Bitcoin was already trading to our upside targets, which was, the close open at the highs, kind of this high side structure to the actual all-time high here. And that's coming in around, 71,600. We did see it swung, but not closed above on that wick over there to $72,000. And the overhead resistance is really around 71,622 to the actual all-time high up here at 73,835. So this zone has been tagged already. We see price pulling back. It did try to hang out on top of the prior cycle all-time high at $69,000, and it did break down below, closed right on the upper first standard deviation of the Bollinger Bands here, and in yesterday's price action retested $69,000 and did close above the upper first. So now, Bitcoin bulls do have some work to do over the weekend here. If they do want to push back to the highs, I need to see a closure back above the daily upper first and around $69,000 to go and retest, anywhere between, 69 and this $72,000 wick high. Above there, I'm looking at $73,000 and the all-time high up here at around 73,835. So anywhere in the resistance between this close open at 71,600 or so to 73,835 is fair game, all the way up to our targets that I've talked about many times at 75 to 78, 78 to 80, and then of course mid to low 80s, and then we come back to it from there. Now, if Bitcoin does lose the upper first and continue to find resistance here at $69,000, even if it's, swinging above there in lower term timeframes, we need to see closures above it. And especially, you could even take yesterday's wick high at 69,300 or so. But in this case, when we zoom into the structure here, we have a trend shift. So we had the downtrend, we had the higher low come in here, and it was confirmed on Wednesday the 15th candle. That did break the downtrend. So we had a higher low that broke this downtrend lower high over here, and that was coming in at 65.5. So realistically, you do want to see Bitcoin maintaining above there, and there's kind of a zone of interest just below price action that was nearly hit, and that's between this wick high and this most recent swing here. It's about a 0.5% zone. And, the reason why I bring this up is if we do start to see closures below this last swing low on this move up, which was coming in at 65,850, well, then I would be looking in general too around the mid $65,000 region if it wasn't already hit. But if it closes below 65,850, I'm looking for the basis and possibly down to the close open of this most recent lower high that was just broken. And that would be, somewhere around 65.5 to around $64,000 right here. So that is a safe pullback area. Anywhere below there, that begins to endanger the actual higher low structure here. So it could even swing down below and hit $63.5, $63,000. I don't want to see any closures below there. Otherwise, I would be looking for price to start running back to around $62,000 by the lower first, down to around $61,000 here by this October of 2021 monthly close. And of course, if it did take out the higher low structure, then we start targeting, down to $59,000 and just below there where the lower second is around 58,500 to the actual swing lows over here. That close is coming in, just below the lower second. You don't want to see any closes below the lower second that also close below the close open down here at 58,265. And because that would be targeting the actual lower low and possibly more, coming in at around 56,500. Now, of course, this is only if we begin to see this swing low, this most recent swing low that turned into a closing low. There was a swing high, but not really a closing high up here. So this swing low at 65,850 on a daily. If we did start to see that, that's when we start looking down to the actual $65,000 support here and possibly down to 64. You don't really want to see too much more in the way of downside from there, from where price is trading right now, at least. Now, if Bitcoin, of course, as I said, can make it back above $69,000, we're looking between 69 and 72 to the wick high here. Above there, we're looking basically 73 to 75. I would even give it, quite honestly. So daily is shifted down in terms of our stoke momentum here. Pivot is at 71,164. So, that's just below the closing high side structure up here, which is coming in at 71,622. So if it did start to crawl back above around $69,000, you'll start to see this number become a little bit more palatable for the bulls in terms of the momentum shift. Now we do have a Saturday candle closure for the 2-day. You want to see Bitcoin closing above the upper first here. That would be better than closing below it, of course. But in this case, the main reason why is because from a volatility standpoint, if it does close below, it makes the basis band an available volatility target, which just so happens to be right around $65,000 to that $64,000 area right here, which was the daily lower high that was broken. And that was on a close. That wick high from that area was actually at that 65.5. So that $64,000 to $65,000 would be on the table, especially if we did see a closure below around this upper first on the 2-day, because that is closing with this next daily in this Saturday candle. And that's coming in at 62,700. So you do want to see in the next 24 hours or less than 24 hours, 23 hours and 35 minutes, you want to see price hanging out and closing above 67,200 or so. Now, the 3-day is going to be closing with the weekly. So the 3-day is set up for more of a range, to be quite honest. And I had mentioned this on one of the live streams. I don't think price is just ready to rip just yet. I think it's going to take its time. And we're going to reference that in the 4-day again in just a moment. But you want to see Bitcoin maintaining for the 3-day closures above the 65,600 to 65,800, basically the last swing low, 65,850 or so. Price can play down to those areas. You don't want to see closures down there, or else we're looking for lower, at least on the daily time frame. But in the context of the 3-day, you want to see closures coming in above the basis and playing in the strong half of the bands. If it can recover above the upper first, around $69,000, we're targeting back to the local highs here at 72 to the actual all-time high area around 73 to 73,835. You can see the upper third here is playing in and around the $76,000 range, almost 76,400. And from the look on the bands right now, the actual structure here for the bands as it relates to price, because it is turning around or trying to turn around a downtrend. In this case, it's only got a swing, higher low in. Need to see closing higher lows, but it did break the downtrend on a close open here. So, it's trying to shift trend, which is where we get this expansion to a compression or range activity, which is more of a consolidation. If we do start seeing closures back above the upper second at around $72,800 to $73,000, we also need to see closures back above that all-time high. But then we'd be looking for expansion, or for expansion to at least start to initiate to the upside in a more aggressive manner. And on the opposite side of that, if Bitcoin were to fall all the way through all the different supports here, head back down below, $59,000 and take out the lower second here at 58,500 or so, then we'd be looking for the lows again, somewhere around that 56,500 to possibly lower. But in this case, it is trying to turn around. Its trend looks pretty good. In fact, we can check on momentum because this is closing with the weekly. It is pretty important. 60,715 is the one pivot number to pay attention to for the 3-day. And then, of course, closing above 65, 5 to 850 or so is going to be very good. Now, moving up to the 4-day, we see this is going to close on Monday, but this is where, I just don't think price is ready just yet. Now it could, change coming into this next 4-day closure, which is going to occur on Monday. But we saw the big expansion up, and then we saw the mean reversion back, and then, right into support. Didn't close below it on the 4-day, which is great. Nice bounce off of the lower side of the bands in the context of a compression phase. So this is also set up in a range. back above the most recent wick high at around $72,000, we're looking for price to play up to the 73 to 73 850 or 835 all-time high, and possibly up to the upper third at around $75,000. Of course, above there, I'm looking 75, 78, 78 to 80, so on and so forth. Now, that would initiate expansion, and that would be pretty aggressive expansion. This is a nice tight compression on the 4-day. On the flip side of that, if Bitcoin started to break down below the basis on the 4-day, and we'll talk about this on Monday's live stream, that's coming in at 66,150. Then we're looking at, $65,000, possibly down to the lower first again, and that's coming in at the high side. Close opens on the daily lows, which is at $63,000. Just for reference, we can snap a line down real quick, and I'm going to show you where that's lining up with. We look at the daily here. I want you to see that this is exactly where we saw these, well, almost exactly. I was kind of eyeballing it there, but it's almost exactly where we saw the close opens coming in that were getting rejected, and we needed to see the closes come in above the close opens at 63.5. Right here at this wick high where it was failing, but also especially get a close above the prior close opens, which was coming in at $63,000. So that looked really good. If it did head down there and bounce off of it, at least from the 4-day chart, and not go below, but you don't even really want to see it get there if you're bullish. You want to see it hanging out in the strong half, at minimum above $65,000 here. If it did fall through that area, we're looking back to this, lower low closing structure, higher low swing on the 4-day in and around, 61,000 to all the way down to where the lower second is coming in at the higher low wick at 60,150, lining up perfectly with it here. So keep that in mind. We have a range forming here on the bands, and it's going to give us an early indication of when expansion is going to kick off. The more likely from this particular angle and trend shift that's occurring, would be to take out 72 and get expansion to the all-time high and past it. But if it did start to fall out to the downside, could get expansion right back into the downside supports, but that then would anywhere below 59, 58.8 or so would start to target the actual wick lows down here. And that's around 56,500. So that's not my first take on what's happening, but I do need to make that known. Keep an eye on the pivot too as we close out the weekly coming into Sunday, because this is going to be important to watch on Monday and Monday's closure coming into Tuesday with the new 4-day candle, which is 62,150. So looks pretty good right now. 5-day just opened. So this is where another thing that I was looking at, and I mentioned in the live streams, is that we see the nice expansion to compression. So the bands were nice and expanded. Now they're compressing in and around price because price has gone sideways. As long as it's hanging above and in and around the strong half here, which is right around 65.5, and above, of course, that April of 2021 monthly swing high at $65,000, then I would favor moves to the top side. We've already seen that. And I talked about this in the closure that broke back above, and we saw it break down below. I was looking down into the supports, break back above. We're looking to the upside and possibly the upper first. We saw a nice wick through it to the highs here. This looks like it's gearing up. It's getting closer, back above, basically $70,000. Roughly $70,000 by the upper first. We're looking at the highs to the upper second, which is now, to be fair, at $74,000, but I could see wicks up to around 75 and even deeper. Now you can see where the $78,000, so when I say 75 to 78, that's where the 5-day upper third standard deviation currently is. And from the perspective of the 5-day, you don't want to see any 5-day closures back below 61,350 or so. That's the lower first. That would favor testing the downside of maybe even the lower second, which would be falling below the actual 2021 monthly and quarterly there from March. And that is coming in at 58.8. So you want to see that maintained. Let's go ahead and look at the weekly. Weekly basis band is right there at around $59,000, just above that March monthly and quarterly close at 58.8. So we do want to see Bitcoin, of course, closing this weekly above there, preferably above this support here at $65,000 in the context of the weekly. If it can push above the upper first, that's where you do want to see this closing above by the end of the week to be, looking for immediate moves back to the top side, but it could develop, this closing weekly and then into next week. We will have to watch that. But, basically back above $70,000, we're looking for the local high again, 72 to the all-time high. You can see that above the all-time high, the weekly upper second has now moved up to around $80,000. So when I talk about moving to the all-time high around 73, we'll call it 73 to 75, 75 to 78, where you saw the upper third here on the 5-day, and then 78 to 80. Well, that would be the upper third on the 5-day as it relates to the upper second on the weekly here. So that would be very good. Of course, anything back below the basis, bad. Probably going to run that low and lower down to the $53,000 support to $50,000. That was a swing to support down here. But, Bitcoin is moving away from it. But a lot can happen in a short amount of time. But, weekends have been fairly quiet lately. Weekly is looking pretty good to try and turn as well. If we do see it closing back above around 68 to 20, and actually we should check on the 5-day, even though we will check back in on this next week. 65 is good. 4 days looking good at above 62,150. 3 days looking fine above 60,800. You do want to see that this is good. Although the 2-day, I'd like to see a bullish reset on this. But $69,000 basically, 68,916 is the pivot there. I would want to see closures, or get a nice bullish reset. It is trying to turn itself around in these lower term timeframes as it relates to the weekly. Let's go ahead and finish up with a little bit of ETH, SOL, and Caspa. So let's go ahead and take a look at ETH. ETH actually, we talked about this big move up. There was a lot of signs telling us in and around this support that it was going to move up. There's tons of bullish divergence. It never broke below the actual zone of interest, and it didn't even, it kept a good distance away from the red line down there at around 2720. Now, in this case, we did see both of my upside and downside targets, get hit. We talked about this on Tuesday, and I mentioned that as long as price was above, 37.25 or so, we're looking for it to have a higher percentage chance to go move into tap on this May and August of 2021 closing high. That was a weekly closing high, and it tagged it perfectly. And I had mentioned that you do want to see it hanging out, above around this zone between 37,725 and 3,500, and specifically 3,520 here on my chart. And it got both in the same day here. And that was, I believe, not really an ETF approval announcement. It was more that SEC is saying, yeah, it's pretty much a done deal. There's still a lot of details to work out there. So I don't know how that's going to happen. They're not having a clear vote on it. I don't know. It seems weird. It seems like they're playing to the crowd and they could always rug pull. So I would be careful. But it is hanging out in the area that you want to see it hang out in. And in fact, it's on the strong side of it, of this support, but it still could come down to around, 3,500. You don't really want to see it closing below the upper first here on the daily. And that's coming in now at 35.63, but, generally above there. And then especially above around 3,700, we're looking up and to the right. Anywhere below 3,700, you're looking a little bit down and to the right into the support here. If it does lose 3,500, I would say you're looking probably around 33.50 to around 32.60. Minimum first. We have the basis band. I do want to see this above this downtrend break. So the downtrend break, so that's going to be coming in at 32.221. It's right at it. So you do want to see another, you want to see Saturday's closure and Sunday's closure on the daily, coming in the strong half here, get that basis band above the downtrend break area. And, if it does swing down below the support, hit the basis, lose the upper first, it's fine. It's still going to be bullish as long as it's above this 30.48. So around $3,050, looking pretty good. Momentum probably cooked. It is. Momentum is looking to try to stay to the upside here as long as it's closing above 37.67. I would give it a chance to try and get a momentum reset. The longer term time frames look fine, like they still got some juice. Yeah. So I would look for, some consolidation, a little bit of a bullish momentum reset, and then come back to it. Now, let's go ahead and look at Sol, which did lose a pretty important area. And you may remember, if you watched the prior video from Tuesday, that I had mentioned, closes above this area here at around 175. And we were previously looking at this as being like, okay, if it can break above, 160, we're setting a higher low structure over here, a little bit of a complex higher low, but higher low nonetheless, especially on a swing. Breakout, it's going to go test 175 above there. It's, we're looking at 85 to, some of the high side structures over here around 190. It hit 188. So it did try to hang out above there. And I've mentioned this quite a few times. I'm bullish on this above 160. If it starts to lose 160, it can save itself around 157. If you want to be generous, you can give it, 152. But keep in mind, the closer it gets to these highs because of this compression and complex low, if it starts to break down below 150, it's danger zone, because then we're probably looking at the low getting run at around 140, possibly even down to this 135, 136 support area. And if that's lost, we've broken uptrending structure on this. So you do want to see, where the basis band is coming in around 160. You want to see that hold up and for it to have a nice bounce and reclaim around 175 to go test its local highs here around the 185 to basically 190 highs here. Above there, we're looking to 208 to probably 220 or so. Now, that brings me to the momentum on this. When you see something like this is actually pretty bullish, because this is getting bullish resets the whole way. So if you were to see closures back above 175, but momentum hasn't turned yet, it would start to set a low, right? Because the open came in, basically close open right on this wick high area and tried to find support there. But if you see price closing back above 175, that would set a closing low. And if it did that, I would look for continuation to the highs and then for this to get a bullish reset. So basically this number will decrease the longer that it can go sideways, and then flip it back up for a nice bullish reset, which it's been doing the whole way through, which it also did on bullish divergence. So looks good. Looks good above 160. Don't want to see that lost. 150 to 140 would be the main zone of interest to the downside. Now, KASPA I have right here. So KASPA is playing in some of the areas that we had previously spoken about. It did test up into the 14-cent region and has now come back down and is hanging right on the top side of the close open here, coming in from late April. So if it does lose this area, it would be losing the upper first. That would endanger, you kind of got a zone, but it would start to, you got to pay attention to around 12 cents, between 12.3 cents and 12 cents, even between the basis and this last swing higher low. Because below there, well, we're looking for this this subsequent next higher low to possibly be in danger. Now, I would give it a range between the lower first, and that's at 11 to around this, 11.6 cents to around 11.2 cents. If it can hold itself up there, then it's great. Of course, again, that's only provided, I would only be stepping it down in terms of where I'm looking if it begins to break below on a close, specifically 12.9 cents, basically 13 cents. If it can regain 13.3, which is this, this topside resistance, I'd be looking for, all available targets at its local high up to around, 13.8 to almost 14 cents. Above there, zone of interest is that 14 cent to 15 cent region. Basically, it's 14.8 cents the topside resistance, but you can see it has swung above that area prior. So it looks pretty good. As long as it can continue to turn the structure around. I will remind you of the really interesting thing to watch here on the weekly, and that is you want to see the weekly close above 13.2 cents here. That would set a weekly low. That would be another higher low and a series of higher lows for KASPA And in general, I would be targeting upside. Now, if it doesn't happen to set the low this week, but close above the basis, that would also be encouraging, but it still gives it, kind of a volatility range between the upper first at 15.1 to 15.2 cents and the lower first here by the higher low at around, 10, it would be around 11 cents. That's actually where the lower first is. So just be aware, you want to see it closing above, set that low. Early week retests down aren't bad at all, but you do want to see it holding up. All right, that's going to do it for me. You all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening. No matter where you are in the world, please trade safe and stay safe. And of course, have a great weekend. I will speak with you again on Monday.